Hello, ni hao. I'm Ellen Knell, and this is Nancy West. Nancy and I have worked together for many years to support K-12 Chinese language education in Utah. Like many other places across the country, there has been an explosion of growth in K-12 Chinese language programs here. 10 to 15 years ago, there were no K-12 programs, but now there are more than 80 secondary schools that offer Chinese. This is a good thing, but with so many teachers, there are also many different ideas about instruction. One question that has come up over and over is, when is it best to teach Chinese characters to beginning learners?
Teachers know that learning characters can be very challenging for students who do not have any Chinese language background. Some teachers prefer to teach characters from the beginning of instruction, and other teachers prefer to delay teaching. They believe that it is more beneficial to only focus on oral language and pinyin before teaching the characters. Ellen and I decided to review the research to see if we could find any evidence that could support either delay or early character instruction.
The timing of character instruction has been a controversial topic. This was demonstrated when a survey was administered in 2013 by Li Juanye to 192 Chinese language teachers. The teachers who supported early instruction gave reasons such as learning characters from the beginning is less difficult and that characters are an essential aspect of the Chinese language. These teachers were also worried that if characters were delayed, students would over-rely on pinyin. The teachers who supported delayed instruction listed reasons such as students should have a solid base in oral language first, making learning characters easier at a later time. Some teachers also felt that speaking and listening was more important than reading and writing. They also felt that the heavy cognitive load of learning to read characters along with oral language and pinyin may be very difficult for students and they may lose interest in the language. We could find only one experiment that had been done on this topic, and this was conducted with university Chinese language learners by Packard in 1990. He had a lag group who delayed 3 weeks before learning characters and a no-lag group who began learning characters right after the semester began. At the end of the semester, Packard found no differences between the two groups on reading, writing, listening comprehension, grammar, or oral pronunciation. But the students in the lag group scored better on tests of phonetic discrimination and oral fluency, and Packard suggested that delaying character instruction was advantageous for beginning level college students. However, we cannot assume that these results generalize to secondary K-12 Chinese language students, as the two settings are very different, and that is why Nancy and I decided to conduct our own research with middle school students. Our research purpose was to examine the timing of character instruction with beginning level 7th and 8th grade students who had no Chinese language background. In order to do this, we used 2 classes in the same school. The early instruction class began learning characters in September, and the delayed class began instruction in January. Both groups were taught by the same teacher and had the same curriculum and oral vocabulary. The early group had 20 minutes where they learned about 4 new characters each day. They practiced writing characters and sentences based on the oral language, and they read sentences every day to other students. The delayed group had 20 minutes to do extra work on oral interactive language. After January, they began learning characters at an accelerated rate. This was justified because they had already learned the oral vocabulary and the pinyin. We had 3 research questions. Will the 2 groups perform differently on tests of oral proficiency and oral fluency? Will the 2 groups perform differently on tests of reading recognition, reading comprehension, and writing? And what are students' attitudes toward learning to read and write characters? And here are our results. The red bar represents the early instruction group, and the brown bar represents the delayed instruction group. This bar graph represents the oral interview and oral fluency scores. We have our Session 1 scores and Session 2. The Session 1 scores happened at the end of the first semester, and the Session 2 scores occurred at the end of the year. You can see that there's very little difference between the oral interview and oral fluency scores. for either session. There was a little more difference at the first session, but by the second session, there were no differences between the two groups. Overall, there were no significant differences between the two groups on the oral measures. Look at reading recognition, reading comprehension, and writing. We see that with reading recognition, there were no significant differences, but when it came to reading comprehension and writing, which were more cognitively demanding tasks, there were significant differences favoring the early instruction group. We also examined attitudes. Overall, the students had very positive attitudes toward learning to read and write characters. We only found one difference. There were no differences in the groups except for question 9 and 10. Question 9 said learning to read and write characters beginning in September is a good idea. Question 10 said waiting until January to learn to read and write characters is a good idea. And each group preferred the method of instruction that they had received. In conclusion, the findings suggest that when oral and written Chinese are learned together, they can be mutually reinforcing. One need not be learned at the expense of the other. The early instruction group showed no deficits in oral language, but they were better at reading and writing Chinese. We suggest that the students were successful because they focused on a small number of characters each lesson and also had a highly scaffolded and integrated teaching approach. Middle school students can also have very positive attitudes towards learning to read and write Chinese characters. Our study results were different from Packard's findings, which were done with university students. However, we have to remember that the instructional settings were also very different. This illustrates how important it is to do research in different contexts. On the whole, very little research has been done in K-12 Chinese language settings, highlighting the importance of doing more research with this population.
Overall, the key question may not be when to introduce characters, but rather how to do so, particularly for different learners and across different educational contexts. Specifically, instructors at all levels shall consider adopting a structured, progressive approach to teach characters that involves teaching stroke order names, including large muscle air writing, as well as copying practice, beginning with simple characters with a few strokes and gradually moving to more complicated characters, as well as identifying radicals and character component. Based on these research results, I have developed a program of progressive teaching that our teachers could use, and we have trained many teachers in our state. Please feel free to contact me if you would like more information about this.
Thanks for watching, and please refer to the article if you would like more details about the research. We hope that these results will be helpful to you in your teaching. 再见。
再见。